This is the Bob Cordaro Show on TV.
They fought for us, now he'll fight for you. The pursuit of justice and liberty. It's the Bob Cordaro Show on TV.
And now, Bob Cordaro.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. My name is Bob Cordaro, and this is the Bob Cordaro Show on TV. I'm a native son of this region, born, raised, and returned. As many of you know, I do radio 5 days a week on WILK. We call it appointment radio, 9 a.m. to noon every day. And now we do this thing, the Bob Cordaro Show, on TV. Each week, 11:30 a.m. on WNEP TV 16. Now, this won't be like the radio show I do every day, however. On WILK, we do a lot of politics, a lot of criticism, and a lot of opinions. For this TV show, we want to accentuate the positive, to feature those who have achieved and have or want connections to this region. So it's a whole different ballgame, the Bob Cordaro Show on TV. Today, Dr. Brian France and I will talk to Dr. Jerry Jordan, one of the founders of the Northeast Eye Institute, an organization which brought world-class eye care to Northeast Pennsylvania. We will talk about the founding, development, present, and future of Northeast Eye while we explore the myriad issues involving our eyes, as well as the treatments and technology Northeast Eye applies to keep our vision clear. If the eyes are the window to the soul, let's keep them healthy. But first, we introduced 2 monthly segments. Pat Sandone, who we spoke to last week as our power player, will begin a feature on mental health and well-being. Guide is his company, and they're applying technology in pursuit of making all of us keep a healthy outlook on life. Guide's groundbreaking app is already helping police, first responders, and everyday people find their way. Next is Rebecca Martino, owner of Stately Pet Supplies in Clark Summit. This locally owned store is fighting the big box myth and providing quality products for Northeast Pennsylvania's pets, online and in their great store. Each month, she's going to keep us abreast of issues we all confront with our pets, as well as how to keep them healthy and the products which will allow us to do so. Woof, woof, and meow. So with the help of God, our families, and each other, let us begin. Well, we're joined with a regular segment by Rebecca Martino of Stately Pet Supply in Clark Summit. And we're going to talk about pets. We're going to talk about the things they need and the things that Stately Pet Supply can provide. So first of all, Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me today.
So happy to add this segment. Everybody's got pets. Everybody has these same questions and concerns. I've been to your store so many times. I hear you and your staff explaining things to people and giving advice. I took advice, and it was great advice for my cat Bones. So it's good stuff. And so let's start with the basic, because we'll be back next month for another subject. But nutrition, feeding your pet. Give me some parameters. Yeah, give me some parameters. It's a broad subject, but
it is. Yeah. And every year that we are in business, I find more and more the need for coaching and help navigating, when I say navigating commercial products, because everybody says they're the best, right? There's not a company out there saying, well, we're okay. Yeah. Everyone's the best. So how do you navigate products and choose them when you're looking at beautifully, expertly marketed packages and all these things? So what we like to say we do is, out of the thousands of products in the world that are inundating you with marketing, we hand select those that we feel are the best, and we just stick them in our store and show you which we then feel would be best for your animal.
Your store is pretty big. Stately Pet Supplies it's a good sized store, but it's not a big box.
Correct.
And so you've got to curate, essentially, the right products. How does we come to you and I have this kind of dog or this type of cat? how do you match? What are some of the concepts that are important to match the pet with the product?
That's one of my favorite things to do. So I start to ask about I try to get as much history as possible. Tell me about your dog. How old? Are we looking at a puppy, or are we looking at, an animal in the double digits? What food have they been on their whole life? Or have you had trouble recently and you're changing frequently? Are you finding belly trouble? Are you finding itching, scratching, or perhaps no particular problems other than being picky? Or maybe your food is working fine, but you can't find it recently. So you want to find somebody local that will have it on a consistent basis. So whatever the particular scenario that brings you into the store, the more information I have, the better. So if I say, start with a dog that has belly trouble, I would like to know how old is the dog? What breed? There are some breeds with predispositions for belly trouble, German Shepherds, for example. When you get into conditions like that, I like to absolutely know what food you're feeding now, how much, how frequently, and for how long have you tried it, and any other variables that might be at play. It's quite an algorithm to navigate. There's a little sprinkling of gut that goes with it that I find I've...
appropriate.
No pun intended, right? So I have, over the years, developed a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Trust in certain brands that I know have not worked for certain circumstances, and ones that almost 100% of the time will work for other things.
Well, the thing one of the reasons I needed your help when I was in the store was because there's a great array of products. And in addition to that, they're not the name brands that you're seeing, everywhere else. They're a better quality and a higher end product, not necessarily more expensive, by the way, but a higher end product. And so you had to help me navigate.
That's one of my favorite things to talk about. And at the same time, one of the most difficult things to clarify when you're up against the marketing of these big box stores, whether they are brick and mortar and or online, it's their marketing dollars versus mine. And one of the hardest things to talk about is how the brands that we carry are not only chosen by me, but they are accessible by me because these brands choose, from a business standpoint, where they would like their product to be carried. And that says a great deal about the brand. So when you have a brand...
In your store.
In my store, in comparison to brands carried in a environment that requires no special training on behalf of the employees, these are things that maybe aren't that special and maybe don't have the greatest amount of TLC behind them. Where are they getting their, let's say, chicken? Is it from the same place each time? Is it from China? Because packages only say made in USA. And that has nothing to do with sourcing. So our label laws for pet food are pretty vague. So sourcing, grade, manufacturing facility, and all other things are not allowed to be printed on packages. So it behooves these companies to be in stores like mine, where somebody like me who's correct. And I also, thank you. And what I like to say is I can be one of your best advocates in any other business, independent mom and pop like mine, because I can only pay my bills when I do well for you.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to having you every month, talking about a lot of these things. You're a future power player because
I hope so.
because of some other things that you do in relation to your business. But thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you.
Rebecca Martino, Stately Pet Supply. We're starting a regular segment, a monthly segment with Pat Sandone from Guide. It's the new wellness, mental health and wellness app that it's going to take the country by storm. But we're going to talk about the concepts every month with Patrick Sandone and get to the bottom of what this whole Guide app is all about. Patrick, first segment, let's talk about this gratitude practice. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, well, Bob, it's great to be here. And the gratitude practice and Guide in general Before I talk about the gratitude practice, I'll talk about Guide and what we do. One of the big concepts with Guide is that mental and emotional wellness can be built over time in a very similar way to physical wellness, right? We all know if we eat healthy, exercise, take a vitamin on a regular basis, we're going to have compound effects over time. Mm-hmm. And then the opposite is true. We know if we just worked out for a couple days and never worked out again, we'd lose all the gains that we had in those few days.
Yeah.
So the Guide app really focuses on that concept for mental and emotional wellness. And that is what we're starting to discover about mental and emotional wellness, is that it's something that you can build over time. It's not something that you can fix. It's something that you build over time by doing practices like a gratitude practice. So the gratitude practice is really amazing in that they've discovered that if you do a gratitude practice, which is simply writing down several things you're grateful for every day, that over 30 days you'll become 30% happier. And then if you do that for 6 months, you become 60% happier. And what's fascinating is why that's true. Because what they're discovering is our brains, like our bodies, can be trained in a certain way. So as we take that time to be grateful every day, we're actually building new neural connections in our brain, which makes it easier to think in grateful ways automatically. And then over time, it just becomes our default way of thinking, which is going to impact our mindset, our hormones like dopamine and serotonin, and is really going to allow us to be happier.
That's remarkable.
It is.
So gratitude practice, that's the first segment of the Guide app that you chose to discuss.
We have hundreds of practices.
But I guess it's maybe the foremost in importance to you?
No, it isn't. It really isn't. It's one that's easy to explain.
Okay.
But we have hundreds of practices that we can custom tailor to each person. And basically, they come in, they can take an intake form, and we then prescribe, just like you'd get prescribed medication, we can prescribe practices that will then have the desired impacts.
Remarkable.
Lessen depression, lessen anxiety, increase focus, increase resilience, be able to perform better at work, be able to build better relationships. Whatever it is you want, we have practices, that we can prescribe that will help you create those desired effects.
The Guide app.
The Guide
Patrick,
app.
Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
All right.
And now, the Sunday Brunch Power Player of the Week on the Bob Cordaro Show.
We're joined today by Dr. Jerry Jordan. He's one of the founders of the Northeastern Eye Institute, which it's an organization that took healthcare for the eye and advanced it leaps and bounds above where it was. And it has advanced the cause that they pursued so long ago. And we're going to talk to him today about all of those kinds of things. Dr. Jordan, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Bob. Thank you.
Well, we're so happy to have you here because one of the things we try to accentuate on this show is local people, family-owned businesses. And what a lot of people may not realize, because Northeastern Eye Institute has become so ubiquitous and so thought of as an institution, it started as a family business.
Absolutely. It really started with my father, who became an ophthalmologist in Scranton in 1934.
Wow.
And in 1934, my dad was actually the first board-certified surgeon of any sort in Lackawanna County. And he practiced to a high degree of excellence. And then my brother Art, who's an optometrist, joined him in 1964. And joining an optometrist and an ophthalmologist was extremely rare in those days because there was a lot of animosity between the two organizations at that point in time. And my father helped to break the ice and began to take students from the Pennsylvania College of Optometry. And he instilled in us really a love of eye care, and particularly a love of people and how it relates to their eye issues. And so myself and my brother Bill both became ophthalmologists, joined my dad. I joined in 1975 with him, and my brother had practiced in Philadelphia for 3 years before I enticed him to come back and join us in 1978. And we had the pleasure of practicing with my dad until he passed away in 1980.
Wow.
But in that time, as my brother Art, my brother Bill, and myself, and Joe Simahowski as an optometrist. And Joe's dad was not only the mayor of Forest City for a while, but was also a general practitioner in Forest City. So you're right, this is an absolute family business because his dad and my dad were great friends through the years.
Well, the building we're all familiar with in downtown Scranton, that takes shape how?
Well, when my father purchased the one-story building that was there, that was the old Scranton Tobacco Building, and converted it into his offices, and that was in 1974. And when I joined him in 75 and Bill shortly thereafter, we began to realize the building was getting a little bit tight for all of us. And during that period of time, one of our other partners, Dr. Stanley Bolden, became ill, and we realized that we all needed to join together because it was the best way for us to survive and take care of each other as we went forward. And so with Dr. Stanley Bolden and Dr. Bill Curley, the five of us formed Northeastern Eye Institute about 1983. And then we decided we really needed to expand the business. So we bought the old Wilson Meat Factory, which was adjoining our present offices, converted that into our present offices, and then turned around and converted our old office into our ambulatory surgical center, our ASC center. And our ASC center has really become the jewel in the crown for us through these years. We actually had the second ambulatory surgical license in the entire state of Pennsylvania. It was very difficult to obtain. We opened it up in 1986. And now, between all the surgical procedures we do every year, we're probably approaching 8,000 eye surgical procedures a year, and about 5,000 are cataract operations that we do in our ASC at this point. And it's allowed us to achieve a level of excellence that we never could have done without having a facility like this available to us.
And it was a gutsy move at the time because everybody coupled up with a hospital, generally speaking, for any kind of surgical issues.
It was a gutsy move, and of course you had to sign on the line at the bank to do the whole thing. So yeah, it was we had a few sleepless nights through those years, and we did indeed, but it turned out to be a marvelous success and has allowed us to just take eye care to a whole new level in this area.
Well, let's talk about that level, Brian.
Sure. So Jerry, you have a very impressive background professionally. Tell us a little bit about your professional background, your educational, where you went to medical school, et cetera.
Sure. Well, I was a graduate of Scranton Prep, and then I went to Georgetown University for a year and a half, and I was one of the few people who got lonesome. I was only 17 when I went to college and decided to come back to the University of Scranton to matriculate. Best move I ever made. I loved it at the University of Scranton. Finished there, and then did 4 years at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia. Loved Jefferson. Left Jefferson and did a year of internal medicine internship at Geisinger Medical Center. And at that point, it was during pretty much the Vietnam War was still pretty hot at that time. And I had an appointment for a residency at Wills Eye for 2 years beyond. They wouldn't take you until your military duty was done. My dad was getting old. He was well into his 70s at that point. And then one of the residents at Geisinger dropped out for the next year, and they asked me if I wanted it, so I took it. And I spent 3 really glorious years with wonderful people at Geisinger's ophthalmology department. And then was always a student of learning. Brian, you know what that's all about. You never stop learning. And since the end of my fellowships and my residency, we've continued to expand the services that we offered. Cataract surgery, which is what I primarily do, is cataract and glaucoma surgery. It's so very, very different. When I joined my dad, we kept people in the hospital for 5 days for cataract surgery. 10, 12 stitches. We had no implant lenses. They couldn't bend over for 2 months. The complication rate was significantly higher. It was a very difficult thing for patients. Shortly after I joined my dad, we changed it to 3 days, and then about 2 years later, we started doing it as outpatients, and then implant lenses came along that would allow us to restore the quality of the vision, but the incisions were still quite large, okay? So people had to still be very restricted. Now, what we do now, the advancement in the implant lenses have allowed us to make incisions that are only about 2.5 millimeters wide to take the cataract out and insert the new lens. And so it's just a remarkable improvement what we can do for patients these days compared to years ago.
Did your father have any sort of impact on your career decision?
Oh, he sure
to
did.
go into ophthalmology? In what ways?
Well, he loved what he did. And he didn't talk about it except in the nicest of ways. But he loved what he did. And because of that, he made it fun. And in fact, I remember going to meetings with my dad when I was in college. He said, why don't you come to this national meeting with me and come and you'd walk the exhibit floor and you'd see the technical advances and you'd see the excitement in the presenters. And it just really fit the bill for me. Okay?
I'm sure he'd be amazed to see, the trajectory that you went on and also what Northeast Eye Institute has developed, into over the years. I'm sure he'd be quite proud of that.
Well, I'm sure, I hope in many ways he's looking down at it and enjoying the advances that we made. I had a funny story about my dad. He was at the very first implant lenses that we did. I started in 1976, shortly after I came back to Scranton. Wow. And this was something that had never been done in this area before. And there were very few doctors nationwide who were doing the procedure. And finally, my dad decided to do one with me, okay? And it was always funny because we'd go in to see the patients post-op and I'd be in with my father and they'd say, oh, your father did a great job. And it was actually me who did the surgery, okay? Well, the one that he did, he walked into the room and they said, oh, your son did such a great job. So it was one of those highlights in your relationship with your dad, yeah.
Let's talk about some common eye problems. Glaucoma. Where are we with it?
Glaucoma is the difficulty with people with glaucoma is it really is, for most people, a silent disease. Most people do not know they have glaucoma until they go into the eye doctor and they're in there thinking, well, I just need a change in my glasses or my eyes are a little bit sore. And the doctor finds that in general that the pressure in their eyes is too high. What happens is as the pressure begins to build inside the human eye, it's a closed ball, so it can only stand so much pressure, and it begins to damage the weakest part of the eye susceptible to pressure, which is the main nerve, the optic nerve in the back of the eye. And in general, the damage is so subtle that people begin to lose their peripheral vision and don't know it until somebody says, hey, what's going on here? And that's when the diagnosis is made. And we have a great deal more medications, laser therapy, surgical procedures available for glaucoma than we had years ago. But it's still, in some people, a very difficult disease to deal with. And these are the kind of folks where if there's a family history of glaucoma, or if you're diabetic, because diabetics have a higher incidence of glaucoma, or if you have certain medications that you take would create some difficulties with glaucoma. It's one of the reasons why routine eye exams by a qualified optometrist and ophthalmologist are so important in diagnosing and treating.
And so to that point, is there a recommended age, if you will, when you should have an eye exam, or or how often? Is it yearly? Is it every couple of years? I know it's probably dependent on the patient's medical conditions, but what are some general guidelines as to when someone should actually go for an eye exam?
Well, starting even in childhood, preschool, children 2, 3, 4 years old, it's important to look at them and begin to treat any refractive errors that may be an issue. So beginning at that age, it's very important. And then obviously children who are nearsighted or farsighted, they continue to get continuous care. But most adults, because they see well and they're not having any issues, probably when you're in your teens and 20s, 30s, every 2 to 3 years is probably adequate, unless there's some family history of issues like glaucoma or early cataract formation. Once people get into their 40s, that's when we begin to pick up certain disease processes that it's important to pick up early. So probably in your 40s, a minimum every 2 years, unless you have a known issue going on. Once you get into the 60s, probably once a year is reasonable.
Where are we today with LASIK surgery?
So LASIK surgery is a procedure, that we use to treat people who are particularly nearsighted individuals, where with LASIK surgery, what we're really doing is reshaping the cornea on the front surface of the eye with a laser. And so LASIK surgery is extremely successful for the right patient. You have to be sure, though, that the patient is the right patient, So it entails a great deal of examination before the procedure to be sure that the patient really is a good candidate for this operation. LASIK got some bad press in days gone by because some people were operated on who frankly were not screened properly and probably were never good candidates to have the surgery done at all. So we're extremely cautious. We have 2 very high-quality corneal LASIK persons. My son, Christopher, is a cornea fellowship-trained LASIK surgeon, as is my partner, Dr. Tom Boland.
Doc, and because we only have a minute or 2 left,
Sure.
One of the things is the impact that the business has had, not only on the level of healthcare, we talked about that, but how many employees do you have? How many facilities right now?
Well, we have 14 offices, okay, and 300 employees.
Wow.
So we keep a lot of business. And I tell people all the time, we're so blessed because our employees make us successful, okay? As you know, in any business, if your employee is less than kind to people, less than warm and greeting, it makes it hard to run a good business. But we're blessed. We have wonderful, smart employees, and we spend a lot of time on training. Okay, a lot of time on training.
So you've got a big healthcare. This family business has had a big impact on healthcare and on the local economy.
It really has. It really has, Bob. Yes.
One of the other things that I find interesting is that Northeast Eye also, brought to the area subspecialties.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you don't, oculoplastics, retinal experts, could you comment?
Dr. Joe Giacometti, who joined us several years ago, is absolutely wonderful ophthalmic plastic surgeon. I trust him with my eyes any day.
Yeah.
Retina surgery with Dr. Pierce. It's the treatment of macular degeneration, which is such a common problem. We can now treat with injections for the wet form into the eye. I mean, it has made Dr. Pierce so busy. In fact, we're looking for more retinal surgeons now because it's so important to treat this disease.
Well, it's fabulous for the residents of northeastern Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, we talked on the way in, Doc, that we could do this for hours. We really could. I'm fascinated with it, and I thank Brian for conducting this. But it was just a pleasure to have you, and we wish many more years of success for this family business for Northeast Eye Institute.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Brian. I enjoyed being here. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Your Sunday Brunch Power Player of the Week on the Bob Cordaro Show. Join us every week for the Sunday Brunch Power Player of the Week.
Well, I learned a lot today. I really enjoyed doing this show. Great to be with you. We'll be back next Sunday, 11:30 a.m. here on WNEP-TV, the Bob Cordaro Show on TV.
Thanks for being part of the program. You've got an appointment every Sunday morning at 11:30 right here on WNEP-TV, the Bob Cordaro Show on TV.
They fought for us, now he'll fight for you. The pursuit of justice and liberty